Well, Jesus isn't the only thing that's risen after Easter. It's inflation rates and shipping costs of records. Yeah. So, anyway, let's dive into this one.
And if only for a moment I could send in your light. If the moment was forever.
Deeper Well by Neil Moore. By Cosmic Cathedral. That's the one, Cosmic Cathedral. Cosmic Cathedral is a new endeavor from Neil Morse and the boys. We've got a few new faces in the roster and a few old faces. Returning Neil, we've got Phil Craigie still on backup vocals and lead guitars, as well as Brian House, that's on bass. And joining the fold, a new face to the Neil Morse family is Chester Thompson, from touring drummer for Genesis. I believe he was also on a project recently that was a little bit more on the heavy side. My mind's escaping me as to what that is. I'm sure somebody will let me know down in the comments. But yeah, Chester Thompson, great drummer, as I mentioned, touring drummer for Genesis, could hold his own against Phil Collins, one of my favorite drummers of all time. And you would think that this is a project made in heaven, and it really is. You know, Chester filling the shoes of who usually filled the kit with Mike Portnoy when having these bigger, epic, Neil Morse records. Makes kind of sense. He's blended very well within the fold here. So, now we have a new project under a new banner of Cosmic Cathedral. And the first thing I want to get out of the way right off the get-go is that this is a good Neil Morse record. And that's about as much as I can say about it. Now, Neil Morse is nonstop. He released an album last year of No Hill for a Climber, as well as the second part of the Joseph series. This is really coming off of the tail ends of that, and so much of what's on this record could be found on those records as well. In fact, if you watch my review of No Hill for a Climber from Neil Morse and the Renaissance, it's a Neil Morse record. You could basically take that entire review and just put it on here, because everything that I said about No Hill for a Climber can basically be said about Deep Water. It's good modern prog, retro prog. There's nothing kind of breaking out of the mold. There's nothing that really wowed me about it. But at the same time, at no point did I ever really want to get up and turn off the music. The playingship, the musicianship on here is obviously very top-notch. The music that's found on here feels like these are a band of brothers, really, that have been playing for years and years and years, rather than this first endeavor. And in certain respects, that's true, but in other respects, there was a part of me that was kind of hoping for a little bit more breath of fresh air on this. There was a part of me that was kind of hoping for a little bit more, interesting playing styles. Chester's drumming styles is fantastic. He never disappoints. But I can't really say that it adds this big new grand dimension to this record. The first track of The Heart of Life, as well as kind of like the second last track on this record, if we're Walking in Daylight. They're a little bit more jazzy. You got a little bit more of a jazz flair to it. There's a little bit more of a funk flavor to it that I know Chester really loves bringing into the fold on that case. And I really, really enjoy that. I found actually the bass playing by Brian fantastic. I love how forefront he is. And honestly, Phil's singing style on here, he takes some of the lead singings on Walking in Daylight that I really appreciate. I feel like he and Neil pair very well together within the singing styles. I really, really appreciated that, and I really like that. Let's get into some of the things that I was hoping for, that kind of disappointed me, that didn't quite hit me as much as I was hoping for. The first is that the big Deeper Water suite, for lack of a better term, is chopped up into 9 tracks, which makes for a little bit of an awkward listen, especially if you're listening to it on streaming sites or on your computer. I would much rather have just the one big, long, half-hour suite of music rather than this kind of being chopped up. Like, the longest tracks on here are Nightmare in Paradise and The Door to Heaven, that are, 6-7 minutes-ish in that case. The rest are chopped up into 3 or 4 or 1 or 2 minute little bite-sized chunks. And I get the business strategy of that, more listens across more tracks means more ka-ching, ka-ching. But for a casual listener that wants to put this on a, prog mix, I gotta add 9 tracks to that. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. Also, for talking about the big suite of, the Deep Water, kind of the title track on here, it's fine, but I feel like Neil Morse is doing that treading water in deep water kind of a sense. Like the last big album from him that I really got into was Innocence in Danger from the Neil Morse Band. And it just felt like everything that I loved about that record and that sound is kind of like a watered down feature on this record, especially when we get into those longer stretches of music. The other thing that I really want to touch upon is, like No Hill for a Climber, which saw Neil Morse doing a lot more introspective and a lot more religious themes, God themes, and specifically Jesus themes, we're kind of full frontal on this one. Like, this one's full Jesus. There's a number of moments on here, specifically on the smaller track of I Won't Make It, which is a Neil Morse ballad, and I'm never a fan of a Neil Morse ballad. I always like when he brings other people into the fold to help him out with his ballads. And it's basically a worship song. And hey, if you want to make a worship song, that's great, but just know that's what you're getting when you're getting into these tracks, And the whole Deep Water is a worship song. It's praising Jesus. It's finding the way into heaven. It's Jesus is the only way. And that's great. But I could see that turning a lot of passive Neil Morse fans away from this project. And I know a lot of passive, fans are like, I don't mind when it's a metaphor. I don't mind when it's kind of subtle. This one's not subtle, friends. This one's full frontal. So for me, and that never really bothers me, I was raised Catholic, so like I'm used to this kind of stuff. It never really bothers me, but it does pull me out of the music just a little bit upon the first handful of lessons of being like, wow, he's going full Jesus on this one. So know that going in. Overall, tying this whole review together, Deep Water from Cosmic Cathedral is really nothing that we haven't heard from Neil Morse before, in both good and bad. For the big epic, you're going to get some of those big crescendos. You're going to get some of those big climbs, those big, payoff moments. His keyboard work is still top notch. The man can write a melody that's catchy, that's hooky. But a lot of those melodies, a lot of those hooks do feel a little bit derivative of past works. I was kind of hoping with Chester being into the fold that there would be maybe a little bit more comment, a little bit more workshopping of those, but it seems like his root was really within the rhythm section. And honestly, that was some of the best moments on this record, was within those rhythm moments. That was the only moments where I'm like, oh, we're trying something a little bit new. We're trying something a little bit interesting on that case. And I enjoyed that. But, we're not reinventing the wheel here. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So, yeah, this was kind of the album that I was tertiarily excited for, and it kind of met my expectations. I am kind of wondering why we decided to go to a whole new band calling this Cosmic Cathedral, rather than this just being a Neil Morse record. In the end, I think my final rating for this record will be Deep Water by Cosmic Cathedral is an album I would ultimately stream. Again, not a bad album, quite a good record. It's just with a powerhouse like Neil Morse, where every album you're getting from him is at least good. I was kind of hoping for a little bit more, but that's just what I'm bringing to the table. And I know other fans and other people will have other things that they bring to the table. And yeah, It's a fine record. I probably won't be listening to this one as much. And once again, I have to blame Jacob Roberge with his record of The Passing for really raising the bar of what modern retro progressive rock should sound like. Because, man, I can't stop listening to that one. But anyway, this is a review of Deep Water from Cosmic Cathedral. I want to know what you guys think. I really want to know what you guys think. Did you love this record? Did you hate this record? Do you feel like Neil is just treading water and he needs a little bit more new blood? Do you think he needs to just kind of pump the brakes for a little bit? Let me know about what you guys thought by commenting down below. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.